Hello, hello. Hey, Darian, Jeremy, Sylvan, and Frederick. Welcome to all of you to Talk Python to me. Great to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, yeah, you bet. I'm honored to have so many Jupyter team members, people around here, and all the work you've done on the different parts of Jupyter Notebook, Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Light, all the things is really fantastic. So I'm looking forward to celebrating the new releases. They're not quite as new as when we first started talking about this. It took us a while to put this many people together on for an hour, but yeah, it's going to be great, right?
Sounds good.
Yeah, for sure. So before we get into the topics, maybe just a quick introduction for each of you here, and we'll go around the Brady Bunch circles in the video. Darian, we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Darian. I work at QuantStack along with everyone else on this call. And I have been working on the Jupyter stack for about 8 years now. And I originally started working on what became Jupyter Lab. And nowadays, in addition to that aspect of things, I'm also part of the Jupyter Executive Council, which is one of the governing bodies of the project. As of this year, we actually changed our governance structure. And so each year there are elections, and we have this new set of governing institutions that I've been a part of.
That's really fantastic. You know, there's a lot of projects where primarily the maintainer. Then there's projects that get put under an organization, you know, like Flask with pallets. But there's not very many open source projects like this that have governing bodies. You know, Python itself comes to mind, Django. So that's awesome. I think, you know, Jupyter is such a vibrant ecosystem.
It's an exciting space for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jeremy, quick background on you.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy, and I've also been working on the Jupyter stack for a couple of years. I think something around 5 or 6 years. I started a bit like on my own first, like a spare time thing, you know, contributing to projects on GitHub before joining QuantStack. And currently I'm mostly involved in the Jupyter Lab project, so the Jupyter Notebook 7, Voila dashboards, also a bit of IPy widgets, and most recently on the Jupyter Light.
Nice. Sylvan.
Hi everyone. So yes, I'm Sylvain. I'm the CEO of QuantStack, which I founded in 2016. I've been working on the Jupyter stack for about 10 years now. So yeah, it's been a while. I think it's almost the anniversary right now. And in the Jupyter ecosystem, I mostly worked on kernels, widgets, the Jupyter server, and a tiny bit on the front-end pieces as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So it's a Jupyter space over there at QuantStack, top to bottom, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Hey, Frederick, welcome.
Hey, everybody. I'm Frederick. I'm working at QuantStack as everybody else. And I'm working mainly on Jupyter Lab. I'm actually the representative to the Software Steering Council of Jupyter for that sub-project mainly. And I started contributing like a bit like Jeremy 5 to 6 years ago, trying to convince colleague in my aeronautic company back then to use Python and Jupyter instead of Excel.
You're fighting the good fight. That's awesome. Yeah. You know, maybe I could ask you all a quick question, since it might give people an interesting view into the world of Jupyter. It's just, you know, there's a lot of reasons people get into programming, but what attracted you all individually to the Jupyter ecosystem itself? Darian, how about you?
So I got lucky. I liked the idea of working on open source software, and I'd worked at a few startups that released open source software, but they were startup projects that were driven primarily by one company. And some of them had community in the sense that there were lots of users and there'd be a lot of traffic, say, on forums and stuff, but not community in the sense of a public-minded group runs this thing and makes decision. The decision was at my employers, and nonetheless, that I liked it, and I just sort of accidentally happened on working with the team that was building a new front end for Jupyter because I liked JavaScript and other people in the Jupyter community did not. So they had to bring from outside the Jupyter community in because Python people at the time tended to sort of hate JavaScript. Now I think that's still the same. So I got into Jupyter because I liked JavaScript, but I stayed in Jupyter because I liked a community open source project that was doing something that I didn't really know you could do, which is to mix your research and your results and the prose that you write and the output of the analysis that you do all in one document and share it with people, and they can reproduce it and they can run your code and they can tweak it and they can do all those things without ever going through what I thought were the necessary prerequisites to writing code. It turns out none of those were necessary. You could make it way easier for people. So I liked working on that. I liked the community. I liked the people. And that's why I'm still here.
Yeah, excellent. It is pretty unique of an idea to say we're going to have kind of a document, we're going to have results, and we're going to have code, and it's going to be live. And that's very special. Jeremy, how'd you get into Jupyter land?
Yeah, I started as a user. I think back in the days when it was still the IPython notebook, like altogether just Python programming language. And I think that was really this idea of being able to write normal text alongside code and have this kind of narrative with charts, interactive graphs, and so on, and share that to people. So I used it on my own, like for personal project, but also different companies to share like reports and then communicate results more easily. And after a while, when you start using a tool, you want to make fixes to it or improve it. So that's why that's how you can go to the side of contributor side, start submitting a pull request and getting in touch with the community.
Excellent. Sylvan, I'm going to come back to you. Frederick, let's have your story.
So that's a bit like Jeremy. So as I said, I try to convince people that something better than Excel exists out there. And that's when I discovered Jupyter. And what was really interesting was the ability to, as Avshin said, like mixing very nice and advanced visualization with text and being able to do that interactively so that in a meeting you don't have to remember which tab in your Excel is the right result. It's like, you just type 2 lines of Python code and you get a nice graph to display like the points you try to make from the data. And that was it. And as Jeremy, then at some point you say, hey, I can do some stuff better and I can contribute because it's open source. So I put my finger in that and on my body, isn't it?
Awesome. I think one of the ironies is, and Darian touched on this actually, that to use Jupyter often is to write Python, but to contribute Jupyter is often to write JavaScript, TypeScript. Like you're kind of taking one for the team, doing the JavaScript that no one else has to do, right? And that's a little bit different, isn't it?
I think nowadays with the maturity of TypeScript as something that serious large projects can use, it's a little bit better, but it wasn't obvious to us as a foregone conclusion that we should use TypeScript back in 2015. So I think over time, that problem has somewhat attenuated, but we're not in the clear. We do definitely have a lot more people who would like to hack Python than would want to contribute to a gigantic TypeScript plugin based, front end application.
Yeah, exactly. They come to Jupyter because they're like doing Python. They get really excited. Like, I want to be part of this. I want to help. Oh, wait, hold on. It's a bit of an irony, or maybe even WebAssembly, as we'll talk about, Jeremy. All right, Sylvan, back to you. So I wanted to change the question a little bit for you and just maybe have you talk about, like, what are the benefits of having QuantSight, like the whole company being so in on Jupyter? Like, how's that affected you all? Is that for your business?
Well, this is really how it started, actually. So I was a Jupyter contributor back in my previous job before I founded QuantStack, and I really QuantStack is almost an accidental startup in that I started the company as a means to continue working on the project, being paid by, as I was a core contributor already, being paid by clients on consulting contracts and whatnot to continue working on this. And very quickly, we had enough business that I could hire one other person and then another and then another. So we bootstrapped from day one. So our success, I would say, is really bound to the success of the project. And I think it's been a positive feedback loop since the very beginning.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm sure it brings a real advantage when people come to you to look and sort of see, like, yeah, this is the company to help me with Jupyter type of change, maybe adopting Jupyter or some advanced deployment problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, we're not trying to be the Jupyter company. There are other
Sure.
groups, and we really have a consulting business model in that people can really come to us for our skills and expertise. And it turns out that so far we've been able to contribute back everything that we've done, or nearly everything. In some occasions, we have to do something that's very ad hoc to a client, and do some custom development that requires using some of their internal APIs or whatever. But like, I would say that 99% of our work is out there. So yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, let's start talking about just a recent event here. A couple months ago, there was JupyterCon. I think the videos have been up for 2 months. So it's been around for a little while, but multiple of you, I don't know if all of you, I haven't gone through all of the videos here, but there's 86 sessions posted for JupyterCon 2023. There's a ton of good stuff. Maybe you all could just speak to the talks that you gave there, or some of the really interesting things that people should maybe check out, because if you just get into Jupyter, you can learn a lot by watching some of these talks, I think.
I have a recommendation. Jupyter Notebook 7 was a talk where Jeremy and a few other contributors to the project introduced the new version of Jupyter Notebook. And usually when you go from version 6 to 7 of a software package, it's, an iteration. But in this particular case, it's a whole new application with a whole new architecture that has the same experience of the Jupyter Notebook as version 6, but has all new architecture and can use the same plugins as Lab. And it's pretty exciting. So I would recommend checking out that talk.
Absolutely. That was a good one. That's also something that's, main topic of the show is sort of this interplay between Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook, and both of the big new releases, which is, yeah, it's a big change, isn't it? Bigger than just the 6 to 7 would indicate.
Yeah, there are also plenty of other videos. So there are quite a few, let's say, technical videos, or more like product updates, as we call them. Like each sub-project has a talk where they discuss and present their new features, or what they've been to the past few months. but there are also quite a lot of interesting talks on use cases, so we can learn how people use Jupyter in the wild, like at companies or also in education, and those are very inspiring. So because they also give people ideas on what they could do with Jupyter in general.
Cool. Yeah, well, I certainly recommend people check this out. And then there was a talk that you, Darian, and Martha gave introducing Jupyter Lab 4, right?
Yes, that's right. Jupyter Lab 4 is also the first time we did one of our keynote, product launch talks with the desktop version of the application, just kind of to expose people to this new way to use Jupyter Lab, which isn't super new, but I think is new to most people. So we thought that would be a good opportunity, not just to show the new Jupyter Lab 4 UI and its new features, but also to show you can download it onto your desktop, double-click a notebook, and open it up in Jupyter Lab.
Yeah. So let's set the stage about just what, people maybe they've heard the word Jupyter, they've heard the word notebooks, plural, but they might not know the difference between Jupyter Lab, Jupyter Notebook. Maybe you all could sort of position those two side by side. What are these two different things? Are they the same? Are they different? Are they synonyms?
Okay. So there is a file format that you will see with the extension .ipynb, because historically it was the IPython notebook file format, and we've kept that. And those are called Jupyter Notebooks commonly. It's a generic term for that kind of file. And then there is a browser-based application that millions of people use for rendering those notebooks and writing them and authoring them. And that application is called Jupyter Notebook. And we just released version 7 of that. And there is a data environment that features notebooks, but also has lots of other functionality that we called the other front end, and that's Jupyter Lab, right? And Jupyter Lab has a notebook renderer in it, among other things, for Jupyter Notebooks. And that same notebook renderer is what powers the application called Jupyter Notebook. I think if I keep saying these words, you'll get more confused, so I'm stopping here.
In my mind, I sort of think of Jupyter Notebook as, which is the single page, the single file view type of thing. A little bit, not quite the right analogy, but a little bit like the Vim or the Emacs user who likes just to have like a single file totally open and just focus on that. Whereas Jupyter Lab is more like the IDE style. I want all the tools and the extras. I want to be able to get to my browse my file system, go to the terminal, do all the different things, and have like multiple files open and work between them. Is that a good mental model, or am I not quite there yet?
No, I think that's right. The Jupyter Notebook is a single document interface. It is, even like Vim, it has a command mode and, an edit mode and all those. So it's not a bad analogy at all. Jupyter Lab is just a really flexible environment to do a lot of different activities in your analysis of any particular data. It is a much more sort of multi-tool for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Excellent. Anyone else want to add more to that, those comparisons, or?
Yeah, for the genesis of Jupyter Lab, the first tool that everybody saw and the whole world saw in the beginning in 2014 was the notebook, right? And got a lot of people excited. But there was a very recurrent request for bringing together in the same page the text editor, the terminals, having a console as well, a regular Python console, alongside the notebook on the same page. And so this is what we delivered with Jupyter Lab. And even though it was a very popular common demand from the community, the a lot of people really loved this more rigid full page notebook UI, and kept using the notebook. So this is where we were about 2 years ago when we started the discussion about Notebook 7 and modernizing the classic notebook user interface.
Was there ever a time where people were thinking to have Jupyter Lab be the next version of Jupyter Notebook and kind of replace it? And then people are like, you know what? Maybe please don't take that away.
Yeah,
Or
that's actually
they always meant to
exactly.
live side by side.
No, it was definitely at some point our strategy to deprecate the notebook eventually, and we had a large public conversation about this, and it just, I think, is clear that people like having that choice. People like having what is just a simple editor for notebooks. And people also like having the Swiss Army knife. And they're not always the same people, but we want everyone who is using these things to be able to get both the benefit of the modern architecture and the updates and also the user experience they want, right? So if most of the plugins that come out lately are for Jupyter Lab and you're feeling more and more left behind, that's not a great experience. And so deprecating that tool you're using and saying you must use this other one, it just isn't what our community needed. So now we, I think, have an architecture that we can sustainably maintain because it's effectively the same code base, but we also can give users what they want because there are different contexts, and it is the case that we would have left some people behind, and it's better not to.
I can imagine in different scenarios, different user bases, it might make a lot of sense to have one or the other, right? If I'm a data scientist working on complicated projects, maybe Jupyter Lab is the right place. But if I'm trying to teach a little bit of computation for a psychology class, and I just want them to do, 3 plots and pull in some data, you don't want to drop non-developers into something that looks kind of complicated. Like, where do I go? Just here's your page. You type in these cells, you see the picture, you get the graph for the study we're talking about or something, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the idea. Yeah.
Interesting. So you touched on something interesting there, that Jupyter Notebook, the single page or the single view version, is now based on Jupyter Lab. And there's a lot of overlap of these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
good.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the right time to go more into the details about the book.
Yeah, give us a little. It's a bit of a jump ahead, but
Okay.
just give us a sense that people who, maybe people are listening, go, I'm not going to use Jupyter Lab. I'm kind of the notebook type of person, right? There's a lot of what we're talking about that still directly applies because there's a bunch of similarity or actually reuse, right?
So one thing we didn't mention yet about Jupyter Lab is that, so for end users, it is indeed a more advanced environment, a bit more like an IDE, even though it's not really an IDE. But for developers, it's also a framework. So Jupyter Lab itself is just a set of plugins and extensions, and they were designed from the very beginning to be reused in in different ways. So like if you go to the Jupyter Lab repo, there is an examples folder, and in there there are a few different apps that you can build yourself, and they are not Jupyter Lab. They are like just a single cell on the page, or maybe just this one, maybe just a console, maybe just a notebook, and this is made possible because Jupyter Lab is indeed just a set of extensions, and these examples, they just reuse some of them and they just put them together in a different way. So we sometimes call them remixes, and in the end, Notebook 7 is a JupyterLab remix. It's just a different JupyterLab interface, but focused on a document-centric experience that users have been liking for many years already. So yeah, that's a bit of the second side of JupyterLab.
Excellent. Yeah, there's a bunch of features that we're going to talk about here that come to Jupyter Notebooks in 7, 7, get the right version for the right product, because of what you all have done here, like interactive debugging and real-time collaboration and things like that, yes?
Yeah, all of that was really a byproduct of moving over to the JupyterLab architecture. And one other key aspect of Notebook 7 over Notebook 6 is that since we use the text editor from JupyterLab 4, which is a newer version of CodeMirror, we also get a lot of benefits in terms of accessibility. Most of the work on accessibility has been going into the JupyterLab code base and not into the classic notebook, which was really based on older versions of older libraries and JavaScript from. That's right.
Quite a bit. All right, well, let's start by talking about some of the new features for JupyterLab. One of the ones is for very large notebooks. JupyterLab is quite a bit faster, right? That's excellent. Who wants to take that one?
I nominate Fred.
Yeah, I can go ahead with that one.
Go ahead.
So yeah, that's one of the complaints of the user is that when you get lots of notebook open, or when you get some notebook that are very lengthy, the UI responsiveness can be low, and so we decided to focus quite some time on that aspect, and that was made possible by fully upgrading the text editor to the latest version. So we are using CodeMirror. It's a third-party, awesome third-party library for dealing with text editor, and we upgraded to the latest one that bring up a very important speed up, and also we have worked on the styling to try to optimize it, because styling can hit your browser pretty hard. And lately, we have also introduced a new way of rendering a notebook, like only rendering what the user is seeing, basically. That one is still experimental, so by default it's off and user can try it. And we are still working on that one to get it on by default for the next minor version, so for 4.1. And hopefully when we reach that milestone, we'll get like a very smooth experience for 99% of our user. That's the goal.
Yeah, it's tricky because web browsers typically want to just have the whole document, the DOM loaded, and they want you to just work with it. But if you've got 100 virtual pages, right, that you would go through, you don't want to style all those and do all the widgets and all that if they're not on the screen, right? So there's this tension.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it can come from tricky part, like just displaying for education, for example, they use, and that's very nice, a lot of equation, nice rendering. And those are creating so many elements in the web page that sometimes just having not so long notebook, but with lots of math expression can crush your browser, basically. That's surprising at first.
Fred, okay, so here's what I'm hearing is like complex math, like calculus, differential equations, those kind of things, not just hard for people, but also hard for web browsers.
Yeah.
Math is hard for web browsers. Got it. No, that's pretty interesting. Darian, you showed in your talk, you showed this off in a video, side by side, JupyterLab 3 versus 4 with a large notebook, and it was much faster. Did that video have the virtual paging, like the render, the scene culling thing where it doesn't render the stuff it doesn't see, or is that just the first default version right now?
This is where I come clean to your audience and say Fred is the person who produced and recorded those videos, and Fred was originally going to give that talk.
Yeah.
I can tell you that, yes, that's exactly what's going on, but Fred can give you the actual details because he's the one who hit the record button.
Yeah, tell
Yeah.
us, Fred.
I have a very happy event that prevent me to go to the JupyterCon. So I was normally was the one that had to do the talk with Marta, but we had to switch last minute. And thank again, Afin, for doing that. But definitely, the video that was displayed was that it's a comparison between the latest 3.6 version and the 4 version with that feature that's off for now by default, but that will bring the best performance for the end user. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a massive speed up. So, on one hand, you're like, you're just waiting 10 seconds. But those kinds of little delays, they just kind of break your thought and your flow. And you just feel like the tools are getting in the way. And if it's really, really quick, then it's the tools kind of vanish to the background and you don't think about them, right? That's how it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Even when rendering all of the notebook and without enabling the virtual scrolling, we get already a nice speed up already, thanks to the adoption of CodeMirror 6, which is much faster to render, and a bunch of other optimizations that we were able to do.
But yeah, I mean, it was the easiest clap in the entire talk was just playing that video and seeing the fast one render and the slow one keep going. It's a really different user experience, even though, as you say, it's only a few seconds. It turns out a few seconds is enough to cause the kind of interruption that leaves a negative overall impression in the user's experience.
Absolutely. So this is not a Jupyter Lab feature exactly, but while we're on this code editor topic, I wanted to ask you all just your thoughts about this. Now, keep in mind, before I ask this question, my perspective. I've come from doing a lot of traditional software development with editors like PyCharm and Visual Studio Code and others. So when I work in Jupyter Notebook or Lab, it doesn't really matter, and I'll say some variable dot, it doesn't give me any help unless I press tab to see the autocomplete. Like, is there an option or discussion around having like more aggressive autocomplete that kind of automatically shows up as you work with it, or is the community just like, we don't really want that stuff popping up around, we just want to type?
So the reason it's currently this way is primarily due to the behavior of Jupyter Notebook a long time ago and not subverting user expectations, but we can often keep that as the default and have some setting to facilitate a different kind of behavior. With this one, I think there's probably actual appetite for it, but no one's shown up to do it. I don't think we would turn down a feature like this hidden behind a setting. I just don't think anyone has both been bothered enough and also been in the time and place with the resources and wherewithal necessary to do it. But it doesn't sound, it sounds totally doable and compatible with both keeping the user expectations intact and offering you the feature you're talking about. Because people have different styles of completion that they're into, and new things are appearing all the time and creating new expectations, like LSP, which sort of changes
the
what
language
you expect.
server protocol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
I would say that in 4.1 there are things coming to at least give you the ability to more quickly restore history. Like you type and then it's gonna propose you to copy paste the code that was written previously in some previous cells and stuff like that. And the same infrastructure will be available for plugins. And I know some people are working on AI integration in Jupyter, and some of them are already working on, okay, let's try to do a request when the user is typing to help him complete the code or give him the hint on how to improve things. And there are a couple of people working on that.
So I really like Jupyter Lab now. Yeah, okay. I really like Jupyter Lab and working it now, but Like as if it could just go, and these are all the things you can do. Just as I would, I would make me even more happy. Darian, you mentioned settings, and that's actually one of the new features as well as like a UI for settings. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is basically a front end that's capable of taking any extensions defined settings and rendering a UI for it, because we don't know what the preferences an extension author is going to want are going to look like. We can't create like a custom UI for it. Instead, we have to read a schema file that defines such, like the extension author who wrote an extension that does Git, right, also has a whole bunch of Booleans that are by default set to true, right? So this UI is like, oh, okay, cool. I'll bring a bunch of checkboxes and check them. And so it's very flexible. It can take any extension settings, and as long as they're described properly according to the API, they will render inside that UI. And it really beats what we used to have there, which is just a JSON blob editor.
There you go.
We tried to make
JSON,
it slightly nicer. I think we tried to make it support a version of JSON that has inline comments as well, but like it's still not that nice. So I'm very happy to see this as the way you go playing around with all the choices you have, because JupyterLab has a lot of settings, but it's really difficult to explore them without something like this.
Especially with all the extensions, kind of unbounded set, right?
Exactly.
And the settings UI has a search that searches through all the different areas for settings to pull that up. That's one of my favorite things on complex apps. I mean, like I don't know what is in here, but I bet if I start typing, it'll reveal itself if it's in there somewhere, right?
Yeah. JupyterLab has two places like that. One is the command palette also lets you search the entire menu system basically. And that's become, in other IDEs too. I mean, I think there's a certain point as a user of these tools where you discover something like that, and then after that point you don't want to go back. So I think you're right. Like I didn't used to always need search in my applications, but now I do, just like you say.
Yeah, exactly.
And this really goes in.
Go ahead, Selwyn. No,
this really goes into the thing we were mentioning earlier about JupyterLab remixes. So as JupyterLab is basically only a collection of extensions, right? And the notebook itself, the command palette, all of these things are extensions to the core app, right? And so remixes are, a way to cherry pick some of these core extensions, potentially include third-party extensions into a new thing, right? And I think that there are not many equivalents to JupyterLab in that regard. Like if you try to make a new complex application in the web, like a photo editor, a CAD engine, anything that falls in the category of having to display a lot of information on the screen, doing something that you will spend hours doing every day, you will want a framework that allows extensibility, theming, a command palette, unified keyboard shortcuts, across the application, a settings editor for your main app and all of your extensions. Configurable keyboard shortcuts. I mentioned that earlier. Potentially real-time collaboration, and these are lots of checkboxes to check if you are starting from scratch. And so the JupyterLab basically application framework allowed us to reuse all of that work for other things that have nothing to do with the notebook, for example. So earlier this year, we released JupyterCAD, which is a web-based CAD modeler, which is a JupyterLab remix. Can be used both as a JupyterLab extension where you find everything that you're used to, or in a standalone fashion. And
this JupyterCAD is really interesting. It's a 3D CAD, computer-aided design editor, that's built on top of the JupyterLab framework, but it's not itself exactly about Jupyter, like programming and so on, right? And it has really interesting things, like it has real-time collaboration between multiple people, and all of that stuff comes from just building on top of this, like you said. That's a good example of something really different, but still possible.
Yeah, so in the way we enable real-time collaboration in JupyterLab, we have to specialize a few things depending on the type of document that you're editing, but really the framework is generic, and you can start enabling real-time collaboration on other types of content than just textual content or whatnot. And so we all got used to real-time collaboration and collaborative editing on text, on the sort of software suite that we use for basic productivity. But I'm very convinced that this will be the case for more technical computing, not just code, but everything where you have to put together a really complex system. Like, especially if you are building something that will, requires a lot of people to coordinate, like you're making a new plane or a football stadium, and you have this unified model where everything percolates across many, domain-specific applications, from CAD to, electrical systems or whatnot. And for people to effectively collaborate in these kinds of environments, I think collaborative editing is going to bring a lot if we can implement this vision. So really, JupyterCAD is a demonstrator that you can do collaborative editing on other things than just notebooks.
Yeah, JupyterLab may become the foundation for things that we would never expect to be part of programming, like you're talking about. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's more technical computing than just, interactive computing, I would say.
Yeah. I was thinking about this book here, Ethical Man Month. This book is thrown around as like by Fred Brooks, basically saying like there's no project where adding more and more people is going to speed it up and get it done more on time, right? It was all about sort of the follies of like, well, as you add more people, the complexity, the communication, and the overhead of syncing and all of that is kind of going to break everything. And so, you can't make a baby in like 1 month by having 9 women work on it sort of story, but the stuff that you're talking about here and all of these communication tools and all of this interesting async stuff that we're doing these days, I kind of feel like people should rethink these ideas. And I think kind of what you're touching on here is like, it is possible to get deeper, important work done as groups than maybe like the mythology that people think about in the software world traditionally has been, right? It's a different world in 2023 and on.
So
do you have any thoughts about this? I mean, it's kind of a sidebar, but it's also important to what this collaborative editing.
Yeah, I like this book. I think the ways. So for a long time, we have been trying to introduce real-time collaboration into Jupyter. We've had at least 3 significant technical attempts at it, right? It's a hard problem. It's one we've worked on a long time, and it's given me a unique opportunity that most people don't have, which is try to justify to myself over the course of 6 years why anyone should want real-time collaboration inside a programming environment. And what I can say is over that time period, I have spent, hundreds of hours inside documents with other people that are markdown files, because that's how we conduct our meetings, or inside Google Docs, because that's how we wrote our governance, or asynchronously back and forth on GitHub, which is not exactly the same thing, but truly is collaboration. And so I don't think there's a tension between, there's a group of us working on something in a room, and we want technical tools so that we don't all have to be in that room, but we could have that seamlessness, and the myth of the mythical, the man month, right? I actually think those problems are, like, on the surface, they look pretty similar, but I actually think they're not the same thing. It's more like back when that book was written, groups of people would get inside one room and work collaboratively. Today, every one of us on this call is in a different location, and some of us are pretty far apart. We're in different countries, and it's all working out fine. And Jupyter is bringing tools like that to people, and less tools like let's add 5,000 people. Now, what Sylvan was talking about, still, you're not going to have one person opening up the grand document that describes like the whole Colosseum, right? But there's going to be tons of groups that are working on systems where there's like 7 people who need to work on this thing together. And Google Docs for wiring documents doesn't exist yet, but it could exist.
Yeah. And it could be built on Jupyter Lab.
That's right.
So one of the big features is this real-time collaboration. Let's talk about that for a moment. I think it's a big deal, as I've been hinting at with my sidebar and so on.
Well, in the beginning, I think we need to start small. Even with Google Docs, when it came out, I think in 2006, many people didn't see the point. Like, why would I want someone else's cursor in my document? Like,
Yeah.
it sounds dangerous, right? And so if you were to make a survey of what people wanted at the time, nobody would have said that, right? Yet everybody does that now, right? And it's people probably have the same feeling when it comes to writing code or doing any sort of technical work. And I think we'll get past this point where people will get it. And in the very beginning, this can start being useful for peer programming, doing something together while we're reviewing code over a Zoom meeting, that sort of thing where there is a real-time interaction between people over some kind of medium. And if you look at more technical objects, like for example, you have 2 different teams, like someone's making a plane, there is a team of people that's doing some simulation and see how the plane goes through the air, and another person is making physical prototypes of parts of the plane, and you have this interaction. Normally these 2 groups would be in 2 different branches of the company, and in order to change any kind of spec, you need to go up and down in the hierarchy by a few degrees.
Right.
And
You schedule a
if you-
meeting for next week, that sort of thing. Yeah.
yeah, and you change the specs, and now everybody has to change or make changes to their boundaries. And if you enable more real-time feedback on suggestions and whatnot, you may become a lot more efficient.
So it's pretty similar to to Google Docs, excuse me. But you have to install the Jupyter collaboration extension for the server, right? In order for this to work. It's not just pip install Jupyter Lab and you're good to go.
Well, you can pip install Jupyter Lab and pip install Jupyter Collaboration if you need the one-liner. But the idea was lots of people install for personal use on their own laptops. And anyone who's going to create an environment where collaboration is happening is doing more than running just one command to install Jupyter anyway.
Yeah, of course.
So like as a toy, if the 5 of us are in the same network, we can launch it that way just to play around with. But really, any sophisticated user is going to tie in the user system and do a whole bunch of config and all those things. And so we're not shipping the code that does that inside core Jupyter Lab for 2 reasons. One is that the main sort of install base doesn't do real-time collaboration. The other is that we're working on that package much faster than we're working on Jupyter Lab Core, and having them in separate packages allows us to bump versions if we need without caring that much, and to add new features, and to just it's a smaller subset. It can move way faster.
Yeah, that's a great design philosophy process, because there was a conversation like this in core Python, and requests are like, we have a URL library in Python, but request seems to be the default. We should move it in. And people are like, whoa, you're going to you're going to make us ship requests once a year. We don't want to do that. This is not like, this is changing fast and it needs to be more adaptive. And that sounds like a similar deal here. Excellent. Let's hit on some more of the new things. So we've got lost from where it is. So one of the things that's new is cell toolbars, right? There's like when I'm editing a cell within the little cell, there's a toolbar with some new features. Anyone want to talk about that?
I could.
Yeah, go for it.
It's exactly what you said. And it is, I think, one question often asked by extension authors is, okay, I want to do a certain thing to a specific kind of cell, right? Like I want to somehow pull out this cell and do something extra with it. Where do I put that button? Or, it's the answer to that question. But really, all of the things that you can do were there before. It's just meant to give users a discoverable way to learn maybe some capabilities they didn't know, or maybe even hover over the button and learn a new keyboard shortcut or something. It's one of those quality of life features. It's not like revolutionary. It's more like just making this thing slightly more ergonomic.
Yeah, I was thinking when I saw that, I was thinking of the biologist who is doing their first semester of a class where they had to use Jupyter notebooks for their work, and they're like, "How do I?" If you just seeing those buttons there for the first month of working with it is helpful. Then, as you point out, you learn the hotkeys. Like I press B, I don't go over here with the mouse, and those kind of things. But still, I think it's a nice one. Let's see, what else did I want to give a shout out to that we haven't done yet? Oh, collapsing based on markdown headers. I think that's kind of interesting that you can organize your document in a way to kind of expose parts or make it more of a report or more of a coding environment and these kind of things. Who wants to introduce that feature?
I can go ahead. So yeah, the idea was to, especially when you have some document that can be long, like from education that has lots of text and stuff like that, it helps the student, for example, to be able to focus or to scroll artificially, let's say, to the right place more faster. So that's one of those nice features, and I think it's something also now we are used to because lots of classical Office text editor have that kind of ability. So it was a nice feature to add to in JupyterLab.
Yeah, kind of related, and it's probably going to sound really boring, but it actually is pretty awesome. I think is the table of contents, where it looks like it's showing the table of contents, but if you say run all cells, it'll actually show you as you go. It'll sort of like go down the table of contents, showing where in like some big doc, if the running cell is off the screen, what it's working on currently, which is actually pretty excellent, I think.
Yeah, and even soon you will also report that one cell crashed, and you should look at it. That's coming up in
that part red.
Yeah, that's coming up in the next version.
Okay, excellent. What else? Running kernels in the side panel sounds kind of interesting. Like different kernels, you can go create notebooks based on them and see all of what is at play. I think that's probably worthwhile as well.
Yeah, so this is more something you would care about if you're running JupyterLab than notebooks. So it's a sidebar in JupyterLab that just says, in the environment where you're running, here are all the kernels that you as a user can see. And so you can even have kernels that might not be coming from your Jupyter server at some future date, right? The idea being, why shouldn't JupyterLab be the place you interact with lots of different resources wherever they might be? And for the longest time, we thought of a running kernel session, for want of a better word, as intricately tied to a file, right? The notebook that it's the kernel for. But, we've been moving away from that. I mean, the same way IPython hits a kernel, but isn't really transient. We have code consoles inside JupyterLab that aren't really transient, but you can take a notebook's kernel and open a code console on it so that you could do some scratch work, but like not modify your
Right.
document, you know? So there's just having more insight into what's available in your environment is what that's about. And again, it's not a revolutionary change. It's just one of these sort of ergonomic features to make it a better multi-tool for being in an environment that gives you lots of different kernels to play with.
Like the sort of use case that we'd like to tackle with this is, for example, there are lots of desktop applications that embed a Python interpreter, like FreeCAD or Blender,
Mhm.
and eventually, if these desktop applications advertise a way to connect to these running interpreters with a Jupyter or kernel API, then they would be listed there. And yeah,
So the Jupyter Lab could almost become a scripting front end to, say, like a running Blender
that's right.
project or something like that.
Exactly. So this has already been done actually in a Kitware's Slicer 3D project. So they run a kernel as part of their desktop application. And so we want to streamline that use case and make it more easier to do.
But yeah, I'm sure the UI for a lot of people's hosted integrated Python is really poor. You know, there's probably maybe you'll get auto indentation if you're lucky, right? You know, like it's just there's not a great story. So they could just, like the other examples we talked about, build upon what Jupyter Lab is already doing. And just add their part. Yeah.
Exactly. Rather than them having to reinvent everything, they can just reuse Jupyter. Yeah.
Yeah. And because of the extensions, you could theoretically have like a Blender extension for Jupyter Lab.
Yeah, actually, someone has made one. So for the specific use case, I think it's Jan Hendrik Müller has a Blender extension to render Blender model inline in the notebook. So yeah, check it out.
Excellent. All right, y'all. We're getting very short on time here. There's two things I want to touch on really quick before we put a wrap on it. These are not exactly like brand new things, but they're very exciting. And one is Jupyter Lite. And Jeremy, I know you've done a lot with Jupyter Lite. You want to tell us quick about Jupyter Lite?
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind Jupyter Lite is to have a full Jupyter distribution that runs in a web browser. So normally when you use Jupyter, you need to install the Jupyter Lab package, Python package, or the notebook Python package on your machine or on a server. But with Jupyter Lite, you don't need to do this. So in the end, what you get is just a set of static files. So it's just a bunch of files sitting on disk, and you just have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and WebAssembly. So the main difference compared to a traditional Jupyter installation is the fact that the execution, the environment runs in a browser as well. So, for example, Python, but it could also be other languages that are compiled to WebAssembly. So all of this is again built on the shoulder of giants. So like the whole
this is awesome. This is so awesome.
The Jupyter stack is just another way of kind of remixing the whole stack. So you take a bit of Jupyter Lab, a little bit of the Jupyter protocol to interact with the kernels, and then even the kernels can be reused in some way, and then you put that together and you make something new. So that's the idea behind Jupyter Lite. It was also made possible by the work on the Pyodide. So this Python compared to WebAssembly, since Python is still the most heavily used language in Jupyter. This is kind of what people expect when they use Jupyter and Jupyter Lite, to have a Python kernel. So
if I wanted to say host some interactive code exploration, I want to have something that people can play with. Maybe I'm an educator and I've got 1,000 students, but I don't want to set up a server and worry about what people might do to it, but I want to give them flexibility, right? Like, this is really nice. You could just put this on a static file server like Netlify, and
definitely,
there it goes, right?
Yeah, that's definitely a use case. So GitHub pages, read the docs. It's very simple. It's much simpler than having to do sysadmin work to install packages. And also for the end user is also simpler because they don't have to install anything. Everything is already pre-packaged.
It's crazy. It looks just like JupyterLab, but it's
because it is in the end just JupyterLab. But and there is also a Notebook 7 running as well. So again, like we were talking about earlier, if some users prefer to have this document-centric interface, then they can also use Notebook 7 instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's excellent if you want to give access to some notebook but not run a server. I think there's kind of two options here. This is one of them. The other is if I'm going to give a notebook file to somebody and say, here, run this on your computer. There's a lot of assumptions about what happens at that point. Do you have Python? Do you have the right Python? Do you have permissions to install Jupyter and all the other dependencies? Can you run a server? Do you know what a terminal is? Like, that's a long conversation. And so I think the other thing that's really interesting, I don't know where I pulled it up, but yeah, Jupyter Desktop is also quite interesting as a quick start to getting in a Jupyter Python environment on your system, right?
Yeah, that's some work done by Mehmet, and basically it bundled an Electron, so it's a web browser that's packaged with JupyterLab, and it's very powerful because now it can come with its own Python, but you can also use the Python that you have on your computer, and that's really a nice way for distributing and easing the installation for the end user, especially on non-friendly operating system, let's call it like that.
Sure. Or people who are not familiar with it. Like,
working
I mean, you've got a Mac. Well, there is a Mac OS ARM and 64 version. There's a Debian and Fedora. There's a Windows EXE. Like that's
it really solved the problem of I've never used the command line, but I know lots of math, right? So
yes, exactly. But when I run MATLAB, I just click the MATLAB icon and then I get that shell. Why can't I have permissions to install Jupyter? It says I don't have.
No,
that whole frustration side could go away. I think this is interesting.
But I mean, this is a harder problem than one might imagine, just because of how many packages there are in the ecosystem, what things you might be using. So JupyterLab Desktop is pretty clever. It can also detect if you have Conda or Mamba installed and use those environments. It can use a running server. So it ships with the newest version of JupyterLab, right? But it could also connect to a server that's serving a different version of JupyterLab and give you that. It can be a client to different JupyterLabs is what I mean. One time, just to see if it would work, I ran Jupyter Notebook and Lab and Desktop with real-time collaboration, and it turns out you could do that. So it really is like first-class JupyterLab, and it's very flexible, and it tries to integrate with what you've got. If you've got nothing, it brings what it needs. If you've got Conda set up, it finds stuff there. If you got Mamba set up, it finds stuff there. So it basically tries to be exactly what that first user experience you would want is. You go, you download, you double-click a file. The only thing that's missing is you have to go to GitHub to get this. We should probably put it in an easier place for you to find.
Yeah, possibly. Like maybe in the various stores. I don't know. That's such a hassle. But
well, no, I just mean go to jupyter.org/download. I just said a URL. Sadly, it's not going to work for you, but maybe we should do that, right?
Yes, exactly. That would be a pretty easy thing to do, actually. Just detect the OS and highlight that, or have that little drop down, choose another OS, right? See all downloads.
I think these two options are going to really make it possible to reach the next 10 million users of Jupyter. Like, especially Jupyter Lite, in terms of scalability, is unmatched at the moment. There is a deployment of an in-browser Jupyter flavor in use at the moment by the French high school system. They started with the Paris area, and now they enabled all the school districts. There is over 500,000 users on this deployment, 200,000 sessions per week, and it's all
Wow.
served from one single virtual machine. And they don't, if they were trying to do this with a one Docker image per user session, it wouldn't fly. And
No, I couldn't even, like, they need a massive IT team to pull that off.
exactly. And France is not home to hyperscaler, cloud providers. So we would need to host that on Azure or Alibaba or Google, and that would be an enormous cost, right? And this is, incredibly cheap. There are some limitations to WebAssembly, but I mean, for the sort of use cases, what a high schooler is going to do in a notebook, like learning how to write for loops or computing a greatest common denominator, this is more than enough. Like the complexity of it is lesser than rendering the UI. So yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. That's why I put them both side by side, the Jupyter Lite and the Jupyter Desktop app. I think they kind of address a similar audience, but in a different way. Check this out, by the way. This probably won't come through very well. But this is my iPad, and I've got Jupyter Lite working just the same on my browser there as I did, or it'd be a Chromebook or whatever, right? Like, it really reaches a big audience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, modern browsers now can all handle it. It's not the bad old days, at least on that front. And I think there will be a lot of really exciting things that happen inside browsers that will surprise anyone who is using this era of the web. Like, we're about to see crazy things.
We are about to see crazy things. Well, we already see crazy things. We'll
Yeah.
see more of them. That's for sure. That's for sure. All right, y'all. I think we are out of time, but we are certainly not out of topics. We could keep talking for a long time, but we'll close it here, I guess. Final thoughts, call to action. People want to check this stuff out. Maybe they want to upgrade from an older version to either Jupyter Lab 4 or Jupyter Notebook 7. What do you say?
Pip install Notebook, pip install Jupyter Lab, and have fun.
Dash upgrade.
Yes, good point.
Casey already got it.
Pull request welcome.
Pull request welcome. Awesome. Yeah. So it's a huge project with lots of people involved. Frederick, final thoughts.
Yeah, that's a very fun project to work on too. So if people are willing to contribute, just come and contribute to it. There's plenty of spaces, as we have just touched some of them here, and we are very happy to have new contributors and help people learn the ecosystem to try to contribute. And there is no small contribution. Everybody is welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody could set up the download page for Jupyter Desktop, for example, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Jeremy, you get the final word.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say a little bit as well. Is the Jupyter community is very welcoming, so you can contribute in many different ways. It doesn't have to be about technical details or code only. Even just putting a talk out there, for example, or going to Jupyter account and sharing your use cases is already very valuable to the community and also to the developers, because they can learn about how people use the tools and get a very valuable feedback. So that'll be one call to action is don't hesitate to get involved. And if you think there is room to improve, for sure, like as you would say before, PRs welcome, as we say often. And check out the latest update on the Jupyter Lite, because there is going to be exciting new updates to the Jupyter Lab 4 and Notebook 7 coming in a couple of days. So I think maybe by the time this podcast is released, it would probably be out already. And also exciting developments when it comes to real-time collaboration in Jupyter Lite, Jupyter Lab Desktop, Jupyter Lab together.
Yeah, very exciting. A lot of things are already great here that we talked about. These are some big changes. So thank you all for being on the show and sharing what you and everyone else has been up to.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.